Now, I'm sure most people who are on Di2 already know about the Di2 Crash Recovery mode. This video is not for you, this video is for the dummies out there, and by dummies I pretty much mean myself and a few of the pros out there that doesn't quite really seem to know how this works. And I got a question recently about the Crash Recovery mode on the new 12-speed Di2. As you know, they don't have that junction in the front, so I thought it might be a good topic for a short little video. There might be some people out there, like me, that kind of misunderstood how this whole thing works. And just to solidify my dummy status, I've been riding Di2 since 2012. That is 10 years now, Jesus Christ. While I knew Di2 had a crash recovery mode, I never really looked into it much. I guess because of my caveman DNA. I mean, what are the odds that I, the most stable man on two wheels, would ever crash? Funnily enough, my lesson didn't come from a crash. I think it was about 3 years into my Di2 career. I hit a pothole at the exact same time as I shifted the rear derailleur, and it hasn't happened since, but the rear mech went totally unresponsive. I could still hear the sound from the motor, but no shifting. Thinking this was an electronic failsafe mode, I tried to get into that crash recovery mode by doing all kinds of combinations on that front junction button, clicks here and clicks there, apart from the actual correct one, of course. And eventually I just gave up and thought I would have to ride home in a very heavy gear. When I started to ride again, just by pure frustration, I just mashed through the gears, and suddenly I heard like a ka-boom from the back, and all the shifting was working again. And that was kind of the point where I realized the crash mode for Di2 is 100% mechanical. It has nothing to do with the Di2 electronics and whatnot. So here's a close-up look of what actually happens as the derailleur pops into crash mode. Simply a mechanical disconnection between the motor and the moving cage. And again, it's all mechanical. There's no electronic crash mode, so to speak. But as you can see here, all you really need to do is shift through the gears until the cage pops back into its correct slot, and off we go. Because Shimano made a crash recovery function using the junction button, I think that's why many people, including me, thought that you had to use this to get out of crash mode. So when you put that 11-speed Di2 into recovery mode, by pressing and holding the junction button until it starts flashing, it will automatically shift through the range for you. But say the derailleurs pop into crash mode by mistake. It does happen, I can attest to that. Doing that shifting through the gears manually yourself is a much faster way to sort that out than to activate the recovery mode on the junction. Now obviously there's no junction on the new 12-speed Di2, so here shifting manually is the only option there is. Pressing and holding the function button on the rear derailleur won't do anything. I can actually pop it back by hand. That might put my fingers at risk with the derailleur on the bike, so I would recommend doing it by shifting instead. Now before we end, I should mention, if you actually get into that crash mode by an actual crash or a heavy bump against the rear derailleur, you kind of need to be careful, because the chance that you bent your hanger is pretty high. So in worst case scenario, you shifting through the gears will throw your chain on the wrong side of the cassette, and then you have a much bigger problem. At least you might have a much bigger problem than just Di2 crash mode. Also, before we go, a little bonus tip. You can actually use crash mode to your advantage in other scenarios. Like say if you've forgotten to charge your battery and you lose all your shifting during a ride. That's never happened to anyone, I'm sure. But if it does, you can actually force your derailleur into crash mode and shift manually, so to speak, to a more appropriate gear for the terrain you are in. Now, in the case of my 12-speed here, it seems that if I try to push it to an easier gear, it kind of want to slides back into the correct position by itself. Going the other direction to a heavier gear seems to work fine, so at least you don't need to spin yourself to death. Remember, if you're pushing into lighter gears, not to put all that weight on the derailleur hanger itself, because that thing bends much easier than you think. So that's it, Di2 Crash mode for dummies. I think we have undummied ourselves a bit. Although I'm pretty much a dummy still when it comes to English, apparently. Peace. Bummer.